big, we're being recorded. There's less big ticket items. There's less surprises when an offer is made that people don't know about. So what we see is when an offer does come through, it tends to have a little more legs. It changes the negotiating leverage. So if a pre-listing inspection is completed and let's say a big ticket item needs repaired, you can come in with multiple options. You can either have it repaired prior to going to market. You can have credits already built into the system where you're getting ready to put your offers out. Or you can have a plan in place to negotiate around these things ahead of time, which kind of puts you in a better position. And if you've got a clean inspection report or you got an inspection report that comes through without very many big ticket items or without much to negotiate on, well, it gives you a little bit of a justification for a little bit higher of an asking price versus a neighbor who may need a roof or may need some furnace work or things like that. Another thing that we've noticed significantly is minor repairs make a big difference in the inspection report and the inspection report length. So you get major return on investment by fixing small leaks, by changing leaky hose bibs, by managing your GFCIs, etc. Essentially, folks look at an inspection report as it's complete by length. For some reason, it really gets into people's heads. If I've got a 15-page long repair list, people say, wow, that's rough. Even if it's minor items or even if it's items that are, inexpensive to correct, etc. The shorter that list gets by maintaining your house or getting minor repairs done after a pre-listing inspection, the better the value looks to a buyer. We've seen all kinds of things where, there's only 3 items on the inspection report. This house is great. Well, those 3 items are like, it needs a furnace, it needs a roof, and the whole house needs painted. So none of those are cheap, but there's only 3. And for some reason that rings in people's head differently than we have 25 issues and there it's like touch up paint and trim the trees and all inexpensive repairs. So keep that in mind that there's some value there. The other thing is certain items like smoke detectors or carbon monoxide detectors have long comments in an inspection report. So I have to include information about locations of smoke detectors. I have to give you a link to, the smoke detector rules for your area. I have to do the same thing with carbon monoxide detectors. So even though it's an easy correction, it's a long comment. And it's also required by law that they be updated if they're out of ordinance. So these are things that you'd have to do anyway, and you might as well get them taken care of ahead of time to increase the value if the buyers have an inspection as well. The third thing, we are kind of talking about a similar setup here, but big ticket items that you're not going to see on your first walkthrough of a house. Folks go through the inside of a home and they fall in love with it. Well, I go through the underside and the roof and the attic space and check out the inside of your heater and all the other things that folks aren't maybe seeing as their first walkthrough. So those are the things that can create secondary issues where people were like, hey, we came in, we fell in love with the house, and then now we get this like backpedal moment of, oh, but what about the fact that the crawl space is wet? Or, oh man, we needed to have the furnace serviced. It doesn't look like they've been doing that. And that gives people one more option or one more out to start looking at this property differently. When those things are tidy and those things are managed correctly, like keeping your crawl space clean and dry, maintaining your water heater, maintaining your furnace, those types of things really show pride and ownership in a different position. And they, instead of becoming ooh, man, this is another thing to think about, it becomes oh, wow, look at these guys. They had the furnace already serviced. Like they're ready to go. Or man, they've already had that crawl space cleaned out. They're ahead of the pack here. So that makes a big noticeable difference for what we see with buyers. Now, last thing, we do a pre-listing consultation. So there is 2 types of things you can do pre-listing. You can do a full pre-listing home inspection that gives you the full inspection report, all the information, etc. A pre-listing consultation or a win walk and talk is more of advice for a seller preparing to list their home. It's not the same rigor as a full home inspection, but it's me showing up doing a 45-minute to an hour evaluation of a house where I pop into that crawl space and say, hey, everybody, just so you're aware, there's some leaks down there. You should hire a plumber. Or, hey, we're looking through this, and these are the things you can do to shorten that buyer's inspection report ahead of listing. Or you ought to consider trimming these trees back before you end up with gutters that are full, because that'll create a new comment on an inspection report. And it's a little bit more of a walk around, I give advice sort of deal. There's no report generated. You have to take your own notes. You have to take your own pictures. But we do essentially a consultation of the specific house for that specific buyer with them and these kind of things. It's just a little bit of a get your feet wet instead of a full home inspection prior to listing. So we are Win Home Inspection. Thanks for having us. I'm going to jump back in and stop sharing, and we're going to give this back over to the rest of the group. Do we have any questions?
Okay, I do have one question in the Q&A.
Hit it.
How much is the walk and talk? And they really like that offering.
Yeah, it's usually about half the price of what a full home inspection would be. It's still based on age and square footage, because I do still have to justify about how much time it's going to take. So we bid them all individually. But if you look back at it and you're like, usually we got a $600 home inspection for this type of deal, this should be around the $300 range.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
See if we have, I don't see any other questions at this moment. So,
Perfect.
Does the pre-home inspection report get reviewed after the seller makes corrections and a new report?
Yes. So there's a number of options there. What we tend to see works the best is if there are big ticket items, we can do multiple things. So we can either amend the report to make corrections because things are corrected, where we will add a secondary comment to it that states this item has been reinspected. These items were corrected in a functional way. It appears that this is this. Contact the sellers for more information on guarantees or warranties. Or what often happens is folks will get that, what we call the dirty report. They'll have that ready and there and available, and then they'll have their binder full of receipts and contractor walkthroughs and this and that. People really tend to trust a circumstance where they can see the dirty laundry and they can see that it was cleaned. If you have a completely clean inspection report and people come through and you don't even show them that you fixed anything or repaired anything, it just looks suspicious. Nobody trusts a perfect house. So we tend to have a couple of options there, but we're absolutely happy to do a reinspection after repairs are completed.
And then another question was, do you have services for radon?
We do. Yep, we do radon and sewer scope now. Those seem to be the two most popular requests for new people moving into the area.
I got a question about that. So with the radon, and I've seen this a few times in different homes where I walk in and appraise a home, and it's, for example, it's got the water heater strapped to the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really dependent on the seismic zone of the area and what's required. And if the lender's out of the area and they push the issue and nobody catches it, somebody pay the bill to put their straps on there. In this area, it's not required. It's not part of code. So with radon, for example, are there hot spots in Central Oregon that is of serious concern compared to like the Midwest?
Unfortunately, yes and no. So our hotspots aren't neighborhood wide. They're not like you go, there is some of that where you kind of have a little bit more radon found in Prineville, let's say, than you do in Redmond or different things. Unfortunately, fortunately, we have lava tubes, and that seems to be our big benefit and negative portion of radon in the area. lava tubes naturally vent radon out the tubes at the easiest points, and they discharge it around most structures and homes. But if you have a lava tube that goes directly below your house and a crack in that lava tube, that accelerated radon level can come straight up into your house. There
Okay.
are actually homes east of Bend that have lava tubes as their basements. You can get into like these cool lava caves, and those houses have elevated radon risks. So it's a house by house, case by case basis. We
Sure.
did an inspection, and radon was very high in a house in Redmond, and it was like 70 picocuries per liter, which is unheard of high numbers. And we tested it and we retested it, and then we had another guy come in and test it, and we were all coming out like, yeah, it's really high. Well, it was built on a lava rock outcropping, and the neighbor's house was built on fill dirt, and the neighbor's house was built on fill dirt. Both those houses, regular levels like 0.03, 0.1, all normal amounts, whereas this house was in the 70s. And so they had to really do some radon mitigation, and we got it down to like 1.4 or 1.5, which was acceptable numbers.
Okay.
So it's unfortunately going to be a house by house, step by step basis in this area.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
So one last question in the queue is,
Mm-hmm.
do you provide specific versus general items in a when walk and talk? Uh, Example, check when the furnace was serviced, check location and age of CO2 detectors, etc.
Yes. So we do. So again, we're walking around as a group, or I'm walking around and giving you a walkthrough at the end. And I'm saying, hey, I've got a furnace date on here that says 2017. That hasn't been within the last 12 months. That's what most inspectors are going to call out. I found that the carbon monoxide detector is about 25 feet away from the downstairs bedroom, which means that the upstairs or that bedroom is not close enough, and so you need one within 15 feet of every sleeping area. So I give an actual evaluation of the actual house and recommendations for like, hey, my advice is, because again, this is a win walk and talk, is just my advice before you sell your house on ways that you can shorten your buyer's inspection report. It's not 100% of everything, because I'm not, doing the same low crawl into the back corner of the crawl space to make sure there's not a drip anywhere. I'm going into the crawl space and evaluating things I can access easily in a shorter period of time.
Last question is
Mhm.
passive tubing PDX code without exhaust fan effective?
It depends on the house and the situation. So if you already have passive ventilation in your crawl space and you can create a bypass around the house, essentially what radon mitigation is, just for folks who don't know, your crawl space in most homes will catch most radon, and before it goes up into the house, if you give it an easier path around the house, that radon will follow the easier path, right? The goal for radon gas is to go from the earth to the sky. And if you give it an easy way, it'll take the easy way every time. So if you have a passive situation where that would work for your house, that might be great. If you have a sealed crawl space, like some modern houses with conditioned crawl spaces, you'll need a blower fan and a system that's in place that goes around the top of the house and has a pipe that runs up, and it does all these different things. But really, it's going to be a house by house basis depending on what you need for the area.
So, thank you, Michael. Appreciate all that.
You're welcome.
I don't see any other questions at the moment. We'll hopefully have time at the end for additional questions. So at this point, we'll kind of turn it over to Megan to kind of give that home stager perspective on the kind of the interior setup in terms of how to add value. So Megan.
Thanks, Kevin. And I thought that I would share my, well, maybe it doesn't. Let's see if it
Should.
let me share my screen. No, it's not. Never mind. I won't share my screen. If you're interested, I would encourage you to go to furnishhope.com to learn a little bit more about our mission. And 5 years ago, when I had the opportunity to talk about home staging, we actually were doing a lot of home staging. We did it for 3 years as a nonprofit organization, as one of the ways that we fundraised. And because our mission has grown and grown, as has the need, we had to shut down the home staging, but I'm still a firm believer in it. I have a couple home stagers to recommend to everyone. And I'd love to just share what I learned in the process that could be helpful to the real estate community out there. So home staging well, if you think of a car and what Mike was just talking about was like, does the engine work? All the stuff under the hood, does it actually perform the way that it's supposed to? Um, that's Mike's department. But if you go to trade in a car or you want to sell it private party and you leave your old air fresheners and you leave your old seat covers and you leave your trash in that car, nobody's going to want it because they want the look and feel of a brand new car. And people are the same way about a house. They want the look and feel of something that is brand new, even if it's a 1970s house. And it's pretty inexpensive to get there with just a few simple moves. So obviously, first of all, you want to make sure that everything is cleaned from top to bottom and then purged. And most of the items that are taking up space in our home are personal things, not the staging furniture. It's the things that we use for our everyday convenience. And those either need to go away altogether or they need to be boxed up and put into a storage unit because they just detract from the overall look and feel of going into a home. They carry smells, they carry impressions, and you might think, but everybody would love this. No, not everybody loves it. Most people won't love it. They won't understand it. It's going to be really distracting in photos. So the best advice that I could give is to encourage your clients to think about and imagine where they're moving to. And if you can get them excited about the dream, the vision of that house that they're going to be moving to, they're going to be a lot more apt to closing the chapter on the one that they're currently in. And it's a process. Like I get it when a client is trying to get the house ready to go onto the market. There are so many layers and steps of things involved. So just getting them to pack things up and put them away is a really, really big lift. And one of the strategies that we found successful was to take in a roll of like blue painter's tape. And we would basically tape the 5 to 10 items that we would say, you know what, these things can stay because we can work with them. Everything else, go ahead and pack up. And if they're, hesitant to do that because storage costs a lot of money or they're just not sure what they're going to want in their next place, that's where you get to tell them about Furnish Hope. So now I'm going to tell you about Furnish Hope. Furnish Hope is Central Oregon's only furniture bank. We're a nonprofit that exists to furnish homes for people coming out of difficult situations, and we do it for free, thanks to all of you in the real estate community and your word of mouth. So you are working with our target audience. You're working with people that are making a transition themselves and they have a surplus and they have a kitchen table that now needs a new home. They have a couch that's not going with them to their next place. Refer them to Furnish Hope. Right now, if you're on your computer, go to furnishhope.com and you can see that they can schedule a donation pickup. We will come by and we will pick up all of the boxed items, all of the mattresses and the couches and the kitchen tables. And you can be ensured that we're going to make sure that those items go to families in need. We will furnish over 600 homes this year. We can't do it without the real estate community. So number one, there is a solution, and you could feel really good about knowing that you're supporting an incredible mission while you're working with your clients to help them declutter and get things out of their home. So let's rewind a minute. They go back to putting the tape on the few items that they're going to keep in the home. It might be a couch, it might be a few other large furniture pieces, but everything else just needs to be taken out, put into a storage unit, or donated. And then bring in a stager, bring in somebody with a little bit of design experience, because all it takes are some neutral items placed effectively in the key rooms to really make that house feel warm and inviting and come to life. And you might be wondering, why can't it just work with the items that belong to the homeowner? Trust me, it just doesn't, because most of the things that homeowners have are the things like their soap dispenser and their dirty washcloth. And we just need fresh things that feel brand new. Just like you wouldn't keep those old car fresheners in a car that you're trying to sell. It's all going to have that detailed job and it's going to look fresh and clean. So how much does home staging cost? Well, it's going to be anywhere from $3,000. It could be up to $10,000 depending on the size and the location of the home. But it is one of the best investments that the homeowner can make. And realtors, I just want to encourage you that it is the homeowner's investment, because if they invest that $5,000 in staging their home, they're going to see it on the return of what they can sell that house for. So from the low end to the high end, you want to list it for the highest possible price point and get the most offers coming in. Home staging is going to be the ticket. Home stagers that are worth their weight in gold can come in and they can quickly look at a few of the surfaces and say, paint this wall, and this wall, this color. Then we'll bring in the staging and it's going to neutralize the area and it's going to look so much better, more relevant. You can take a 1970s home and with a low investment of paint and just a few like cheap and cheerful things like putting lipstick on a pig, you can make that home really attractive. And it's competing against, I mean, we know that Polish and Hayden are offering a lot of great incentives right now, especially with lowering interest rates or cash back to the buyers. You want to invest in the home staging so that an older home can compete in the market of the new homes. So the last thing I want to say is if you haven't checked out Furnish Hope yet and you've thought about donating items yourself or encouraging your clients to do that, we're located just down the road in Bend off of Reed Market and 9th Street. Our donation center is open Monday through Saturday from 9 to 11 o'clock. And when you bring towels or you bring a mattress or you bring some pots and pans, pop your head in and say, hi, we'd love to give you a tour.
Thank you, Megan.
Awesome.
There's one question in the queue as to like when staging a home in that $3,000 to $10,000 range, how long can you stage a home for that price?
So typically you're going to pay the upfront cost. Let's say it's $5,000 upfront to be able to stage a home. And then after the initial 60 days, some stagers might adjust their contract. It might be 45 days, but typically it's around 60 days. Then you're going to pay a monthly rental fee on the items being in there. And that could be around 30% of what the initial cost was for the home staging. Now, I will say that given the current market and how long things are sitting, it still is a worthwhile investment to get the home stage, to get the professional photos, to do that big push. If the house is still on the market 6 months later, you got to ask yourself two questions: is it priced appropriately? And if you haven't had that much activity, you probably need to lower the price. But if you're paying, let's say $1,000, $1,500 a month to keep the staging in there, it's done its job by getting the good listing photos. At this point, you probably need to just lower the price and do a bunch of marketing to try and get people in there for open houses and get that place sold.
Great. Let's see if we have any other questions. Is staging done while the owners are still living in the home?
Ideally, no, because people are messy and you don't really want people using, like, staging items are meant to look like they're crisp and brand new from the store. So it's better if the most ideal situation is you do everything in your power to come in with the right price point, the right photos, and a big push for the first week that house is on the market, and get those sellers get them to go take a weekend vacation, or maybe they have a friend's house they can stay at, or there's an Airbnb that they can stay at. But that way, you get the most people in through the open house and through the advertising that you've done, and everything still looks and feels fresh and new, and it doesn't have that smell that individuals carry with them, which they just do.
One other question, I think, how does it work when, no, that was the question. Is it common for listing agents to pay for staging?
Um, that depends. We worked with a lot of agents that they would offer to do a percentage of it. They might say, "Hey, we'll go in 50%," and that worked for the client because they felt like there was skin in the game. I wouldn't recommend that a realtor do pay for it 100% because, listen, your client is going to be pushing for maybe sometimes a ridiculous price point that they want to get for the house. Let's say that you've invested 5,000 into staging and your client's like, no, my house is worth 1.2. And you know that it's not going to sell until you bring it down to $1 million. Well, you're the one that's paying for the staging and you're the one that's paying for that monthly fee month after month when really they need to bring the price down. So it's their investment that you're really needing to just have that conversation with them about the return that they'll see on it. And it gives you a little bit more leverage when it comes to trying to adjust the price for the house because they're the ones that are paying for that monthly staging if it goes long.
Another question was, how do you get into home staging?
Well, If you find yourself looking all the time at houses and analyzing what people are doing for staging, which is what I for some reason like to do, then you might enjoy home staging. But it is not a glamorous job. It is really labor intensive. It is really dirty. And the only glamorous part of it are the listing photos that the photographer does. So, not to discourage you, but I would just say there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that what you could do is reach out to Wyatt Jane Design, Style 8, SS&D. Those are the different big staging companies that we've referred people to, and just offer to go along for the ride and to see what it's like.
Perfect.
Um, I'm gonna jump in just for a second here because I get to hang out with buyers usually for 3 or 4 hours at a time.
Mhm.
Buyers have terrible imaginations. So if you can stage a house with this cool corner that's like really neatly set up and blah blah blah, if it's empty or if it's used the way that you've been using it for the last 15 years, they're gonna look at it like that's a weird corner. What are we ever gonna do
Yes.
with this? And in reality, it's a reading nook or a breakfast space,
Yes.
and you see the difference. And when I go into a house that's cluttered and full of people's personal items, and a buyer walks in, they're just kind of like,
Yeah.
I'll figure out what I'm doing with this space, and I think I'd like to have a this here. I wonder, but you go into a house that's fully staged and all the surfaces are clean and all the spaces are used in like a more modern or more design oriented way. People go in
Yeah.
and they're like taking pictures of it, and they're like, oh, I want to
Mhm.
make sure that I do this with the house when I get into this space, or man, it's really cool how they have that set up over there, and I want to go find one. Regularly, we see people like, can I buy that sofa? It fits
Yeah.
perfectly. So it
Yeah.
really is interesting. I joke all the time. Buyers have no imagination when they go into a
Right.
plain empty house or when they go into a house that's already lived in by somebody else. They're just not seeing it the same way. So
Right.
I'm firsthand. I see it all the time that it does seem to
Yeah.
make a difference.
So I'd be
Yeah.
curious.
And I think,
Oh, go
go
ahead.
ahead, Kevin.
No, I was just going to say on a different note. So go ahead and finish what you guys were talking about, and then I'll ask my question.
Okay. I would say that that's why good staging always neutralizes an area too, because there's colors that are just offensive to people. And so you'll notice that houses that are professionally staged are often pretty neutral, but it's easier for somebody to add their purple pillow or their teal color on top of the neutral than it is to deneutralize something. The other
Yeah,
thing is that you can walk into a home and somebody has this den set up like a fishing lodge, and they think it's, because it's theirs, they think it's the best thing ever. And don't get me wrong, I love to fish, but um, what percentage of the population is looking for a fishing lodge den? They're not. So the job of the stager is also to make every room as usable and functional for the broadest audience possible. So any of those things that are niche and super unique, the goal is neutralize it, make it relevant. We all need to sleep. We all need to sit and hang out. We all need to eat a meal. So you create spaces that are functional and you solve the problem of like, what's that weird corner? Oh, that's where I have my coffee because you put
yeah,
a little coffee cup and a table there.
I was just going to ask. So, for example, home staging, and then there's those, you recommended home staging for those that aren't going to occupy the house. But then I think your comment about putting blue tape on just the items that you want to leave behind. I know, like for my wife and I, when we sold our house, we had some really good advice because we had to live in the house while we sold it. We didn't have another
Mm-hmm.
place to move. And so the decluttering was huge. We completely got it down to almost like Airbnb style, just the necessities to live and clean the closets out, everything to where it was just what we were going to need for the next 30 days. And then we went and got advice, get new linens, get new towels, get new.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
it gave it that fresh look, even though we were living in it. And I think I was
Yeah.
curious your thoughts on that for those that are living in the house at the time that they're needing just to do the best they can.
Yes, for sure. And we would call that just kind of like a modified or a mini stage where we would go in and just give advice. And here's links to what we would recommend you go buy. And if you can declutter it, you could just keep these minimal things, and then buy fresh towels and linens. And it never goes wrong to just buy those light neutral colors.
Mhm.
I see a question here
Yep.
on virtual staging, and I would say that virtual staging works decently for the photos to draw people in. But I've been to a lot of virtually staged houses, and what happens is you walk in and you don't remember the photo of that nice mid-century modern living room set, and all of a sudden you're in that 1980s Sunrise Village house that it needs a lot of updating, and you're totally focused on all of the updates that need to be done, and you do not have the imagination of the staging that was in there. So a lot of people, like Mike said, don't have the imagination. And when the staging is actually in the house, there's something to be said about the layers and the textures and the kind of the emotions that it evokes about, like, oh, I could imagine myself on this couch with my feet up on the coffee table. And when there's no furniture, then you're just nitpicking all the things that you see wrong with the house.
Great. Thank you, Megan. Really appreciate
Yeah.
that and all the insight. Is there any other questions before we move on? I don't currently
I
see
got a
any.
question.
Yeah.
I'm interested to know what's the age of the home that you would say is mostly staged? Is it a newer home or is it back to the 1960, 70, 80 vintage homes?
Every house deserves to be staged. So
Well,
I, um, when I look through and I just look through listings all the time, I think that in general, people that are just trying to do the very, very bare minimum and spend the least amount possible are not going to be staging their home. And chances are they're not painting the walls. They're not doing the behind the under the hood things that Mike talked about. And then that begs the question, like, if they didn't do this little lift, then what else have they not done over the years?
sure, sure. I guess where I was going with that is I look at some of the what I call architectural wonders. You see some of these through 70s, or something an appraiser looks at is, all right, this home at one point in time met buyers' tastes and preferences. Usually that's a small kitchen that's isolated from the rest of the area. Now market tastes have changed to where it's more open and things like that. And I was just wondering, should you have that 1975 ranch design home, but it's kind of chopped up and partitioned? Would staging be more of a premium in that setting than a 2-year-old polished home that was just built?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the polished home is going to be more polished, and Hayden homes are just more easy to understand. Like the spaces, you can walk in and it's obviously here's how you would use it.
Mm.
Whereas that 1970s home, people need a lot more creativity and imagination to think about the walls they've knocked down and the vaulted ceilings they put in and whatever. So the staging will go farther in a home like that. You might see a greater return on what you could charge for that home. But then, of course, it's going to have to appraise for that
Oh,
amount.
for sure. Them dang appraisers.
Yes.
Which leads
And I
to,
think there was a question
yeah.
about, like, does staging impact the appraisal? I would say it should, but what do you say, Donnie?
It sure messes me up for sure. I mean, something, the reason why I say it messes me up is as an appraiser, I'm always after what impacts value. And you'd mentioned that, you see a return on the end of that for the sales price. And my question automatically goes, okay, what's the empirical data that shows that? What is that percentage of return on that investment? However, it's not always value, it's also marketability. So the larger the buyer pool, the greater success that you're going to have with the sales price that you're looking for. And by limiting that buyer pool, I would argue you're extending that marketing time, possibly taking a hit on value eventually. There's a ripple effect to that. So, and that's why I posed the question on the age of the home, because I think there's some things that people are not in a position to make significant modifications to an older home. However, if you can doll that up and bring some professional experience to the table as far as how it's staged or what could happen with the space or with the functionality of a main living area, That could, it seems to me that would enhance that opportunity, widen that market share a little bit more. So
Curiosity, Donnie, is how much is it, I know as you try to be as empirical as you can be, as unbiased as you can be, but if you walk into, two identical homes built at the same year, and one has been staged and looks therefore more well maintained versus one that's not staged and therefore looks maybe more aged, does that have an effect on the depreciation value of that home?
it could. I think we're very critical also, right?
Yeah.
So keeping in mind everything has to blend together. If that staged home, I go in the garage, for example, and there's a gas forced air heater, but I notice soot on the ceiling, right? I mean, so it's really an all encompassing call on the condition of the entire home, keeping in mind, similar to looking at the photos on listings.
Hmm.
Get some great shots, and then when I verify them, I find out, yeah, they're older updates, they're really good photos, but there was a lot of work that needed to happen there. So,
Gotcha.
but in fact, there is that. It's my job to be objective in those situations, but I'm looking at it as through the eyes of a buyer. So good curb appeal, hitting the front door, going through the house, looking for consistency of that I can walk away with a judgment call on, yeah, this property's been adequately maintained or very well maintained. But they all have to fold together. So or come together. There has to be consistency there.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I think that's a good segue. And we're already kind of diving into the appraisal. So, with that, Donnie, I think I'll just go ahead and turn it over to you to kind of share
Okay.
your perspectives on that. So,
Yeah. So where I'm going to go with this is going to feather in with a lot of what's talked about, and I think Mike has, first of all, to clear it up, Mike has done a great job pinpointing the difference between a home inspector and an appraiser inspecting a property. For the longest time, we couldn't use we could use the word inspection, but I avoided that because there was confusion,
Yeah.
very big confusion there. And so what I did was I would say stuff like observation. Well, that's kind of weird too, right? Physical observation of the property, but it worked for a time. Here recently, though, our standards has come up with an appraisal term called physical inspection, and it clearly identifies that this is not a home inspection. This is an inspection carried out by an appraiser. The big difference is, as Mike mentioned before, I'm looking at things as a buyer would. I'm not testing outlets. I'm not, getting into the meat of that construction. In some appraisal requirements, conditions, FHA and VA, they're going to push on the appraiser more so to look in the crawl space, get in the attic, test the appliances, but it's still very limited compared to what a home inspector does. So, as many of you probably already know, these are two totally different inspections. The things I do point out is, cracks in the foundation if they're significant. I'm not a professional. I just call them out and say it needs to be looked at, or things of that nature. But my objective is to, at the end of that physical inspection, to conclude a overall condition of that property and quality and any functional issues that may exist within that property. So with that, just to give you an idea from a foundational point of appraising and valuation, what I look at. The theory is when a new constructed home is erected, it's new, it's whatever quality, be it standard, stock, good quality, very good quality. But over the life expectancy of that home, there's depreciation that takes place. Now, I've heard this saying that if you dance to the music, eventually you got to pay the fiddler. And for homeowners that neglect, or not even intentional, but they put off maintaining that property at an adequate level, over time, that ends up catching up, either in the sales price or when you sell the property or whatever happens there. So there's some diminution in value that may not be recaptured. So if there's $5,000 worth of work, now that the home inspection is done, some things are noted, the GFCI is not functioning right. That's typical maintenance. And by neglecting those over the years, it may cost you X amount of money to correct that now. That doesn't necessarily mean that's the return on that sales price, right? And so a well-maintained home is going to have less of that involved with it. And the reward's going to be there due to just consistent discipline. Interestingly enough, we see this not just with single family residents or structures, but also with whole neighborhoods. And case in point, neighborhoods like that go through transition. So they're built out, they're climbing, they're increasing, and then they plateau, and then the neighborhood starts depreciating. Houses are looking in bad condition, they become rentals, whatever happens. And over time, the price point gets to a point where they become attractive to new home buyers. And people buy them, they fix them up, and then they go through what's called a revitalization period in that neighborhood. The same thing, you can point to Kings Forest. I'll pick on that because my grandmother built one of the new houses in there back in the early 80s. I think it was the 80s. We've seen that neighborhood go through a transition, and market conditions dictate where buyers go in that market. Meaning, when we see an aggressive seller's market like we saw after COVID, people were a lot more tolerant, where you saw the home inspection waivers, appraisal waivers, the supply was just really low. And so that drove prices. People would buy homes, and buyers were a lot more tolerant with issues with the house than they are today. But during that period, buyers would buy them and renovate them. And I would say even before that, I think that was happening after 2013. Some of these homes were being purchased and completely renovated on the inside. So that's an example of whole neighborhoods going through the same cycle that a single family home would go through. And so the deferred maintenance becomes a big issue in valuation, and especially in today's market. Sellers could, again, get away with that a little bit more in 2020, 2021, but now buyers are slowing it way down from what I've seen. And many of you probably obviously recognize that. So there is one element that I would point to, though, that trumps that still. And that is, if you have a rare property, say you've got 100 foot of Deschutes River frontage, and you have that 1980s home that has really good quality, but it's dated finishes. For the sake of that property and its scarcity, that still drives a component of tolerance for a buyer. I would say somebody who would come in, and you would probably do better with that property than if that property was off the river, just in a subdivision somewhere with no really local location amenity that would enhance that property to people, that make it more attractive to more people. So I still see some riverfront properties and certain just unique properties that carry a significant premium that pulls it along, even in today's market. So thinking about return on investment, I'm with Mike in today's market. When I go through that house and I begin to see outlets hanging from the wall or just one thing after another, that gives a strong signal of what condition that home's in. Now, for me personally, I could fix those things no problem, but the bulk of the market, are they tolerant of that in that market segment? And That's the question that I chase down in valuation. Um, and so a couple variables there that really disrupt that. The market in Northwest Crossing is not the market in Kings Forest. And so even people like to ask me, well, if I redo this kitchen, will I get a 70% return? And like Mike said, the answer is yeah, no, I don't know. I mean, you know, it's 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 really, I mean, our market is incredibly fluid, and we've seen with the changes in interest rates, I mean, there's so many variables that impact people's decisions. And at any given time, trying to nail that down into a broad one and for all answer is negligent. I mean, it's just not reality. And it's really what's going on. And as realtors, you know your markets really well. And so to say, if you've got the resources to go ahead and update it, what's the return on that? And then make a logical choice to say, I'll spend the 150,000 for the remodel, and then we'll get another 75 or 100,000 out of it, but it really needs to be updated. I don't know what the answer is there, but it's very difficult to make a broad statement across all single family products. So the return on the investment, but what I can say is the marketability, it is evident. I mean, night and day difference between a home that's in need of repair or update versus one that's been modernized and meets current market taste and preferences. There's a significant difference between them. Even in some cases that I've worked on, where we're talking multi-million-dollar properties, just to give you an example of how I try as an appraiser not to get stuck in a certain idea or a place in my valuation, meaning updated versus not. Updated is going to win. In a few cases, I've seen homes in need of update that had multiple offers and sold in a really short time. But again, the case in point was the rarity of that property. It was a fabulous site with wonderful views. So it's really a case by case basis. But I think at the end of the day, if you have my reaction would be, and I sell properties, not as a realtor, but just properties that I've owned. I'm cheap. I'm an appraiser, right? It's all about feasibility. And if I can get enough of a return out of it or a bigger market share, I'll move on something. If not, I'll take the hit and sell it. I balance that out. And so it's really up to the individual situation, but the easy things, the low hanging fruit, why not fix them? I mean, why not just get the light switches fixed, doll it up if you got to live there and you can't stage it. Set yourself up for as much success as you can at that point. And yeah, anyway. So again, the market segment really is a big factor in the valuation side of things. The current market conditions in that neighborhood, and starting general and then in that neighborhood or like neighborhoods is a big deal. What I like to tell people when they ask me what should I do with my house, should I model the kitchen or should I, whatever that case may be, I encourage them to go see a listing in your neighborhood. Go look at other houses that are available for sale. And if you're not sure of what that consistent conformity is of that neighborhood, go take a look at what somebody did with the renovation that now it's listed, and make the decision off of that. Number one, that keeps you within the realm of reasonableness within the neighborhood, meaning I try to be sensitive to super adequacy as well. And that's a big appraisal term that basically means over improvement. So if I order Italian tile from Italy and put it in my manufactured home, that's an example of an over improvement. The cost of that will not be recouped out of that manufactured home. So at least that keeps you within the boundaries of what the neighborhood's gonna be interested in. and not over improving. So yeah, again, on the valuation side, there's a lot of moving parts to, um, uh, you know, well, first of all, come to the conclusion of a condition of a home, but then what the appraiser should be after is what's the buyer pool, what's the most probable buyer pool, and what's their response to this feature, this issue, either in need of repair or been updated, or is it over improved? All those things need to come into focus in order to arrive at a conclusion of value or an adjustment between two properties. So,
Donnie, there's a question in the queue asking, how have appraised values in Bend been lately, and have you had any issues?
oh boy. Well, it depends on your definition of issues. From the valuation standpoint, appraisals that are getting harder are usually a result of not having consistent results. So market analysis, this is a step in the valuation process that we do, continues to be confounding. And what I mean by that is where in a market that's definitely trending upwards or downwards or stable, it's very easy to put a market analysis together because there's enough sales to, or lack of sales, to support that. What we've been seeing for a while now is running multiple different market analysis and seeing confounding results, meaning price trends aren't just going up or stable or down, they're bouncing all over the place. And with that in mind, it just takes longer to do those type of results. As far as the general market, what I would say is very few times have I actually gotten to a position where I've considered market in decline. And the reason being is I could see price points drop in certain market analysis. But my hangup is when my marketing time is still less than 30 days, when supply is still low at about 4 months or even 3.5 months, those do not coexist in a declining market. Take you back to 2011, we had a 12-month supply, definitely oversupply, long marketing times, and a downward trend in price. All three of those factors working together illustrate that market's on decline. And vice versa in 2013, we see the opposite happening. Prices are increasing, marketing times are shrinking, inventory is going down next to nothing. Well, it was 3 months, but low. The average nationally, they say, is about 6 months supply. I always believed that Bend was under that because Bend is just a unique area, and the desirability and activity that Bend gets. The earliest appraisal I've done was in 1986. And no, I didn't do the appraisal back in 1986. It was a retro. But the experience of working on that and just watching the dynamics of this market was incredible. I mean, it was fascinating to see over time, even the seasonal pattern not being very much different. So yeah, so the valuations in Bend in particular, again, depending on the market segment, you get under 500,000, I would argue that's pretty aggressive still in Bend. What I have noticed though is the supply of over 1.8 million. We're starting to see that increase. That's been happening for a while, but it's still not at ridiculous levels. But definitely seeing some fluctuations there. And a transition period, just to finish the thought, is always the most difficult to appraise in because you see confounding results, either through the market analysis or between sales. That usually opens the door into a transition. I would say the last transition we had was away from the seller's market, aggressive seller's market from COVID, and into more of a market that's favorable for buyers. Um, but it, but I would also caution a knee-jerk reaction to saying it's a declining market, in the sense that even coming out of the Great Recession, we'll call it, in 2011, hitting the lowest, it took years for the Ben market to catch back up. If I've got a graph on my website that gives you the 1995 to date median price in Ben that you can look at, and you'll see that increase in 2013 well below the best fit line that's on there. And so it just takes a long time for the market to actually shift and correct. And that usually doesn't happen overnight.
So, Donnie, we have a couple more questions in the queue, but we are at the hour. So I just wanted to, one, ask if you're okay staying on a few extra minutes to answer those questions. And if so, also tell people that are on the call that need to get off that, you're welcome to go ahead and get off. You've been on long enough for your hour credit. But for those that would like to stay on, if Donnie, you still have a few more minutes to answer a couple questions.
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Then we'll go ahead and ask those questions. The first was, along with Jennifer's questions about the Bend area, what about Lapine? What have you
Ah,
seen in Lapine?
that's great. And the reason why I like that question so much is, if you remember back to 2005, we saw a huge migration and going out of Bend. Bend prices were incredibly high. I think 2005, we were in some market segments, 35% increase for the year. That pushed buyers into the Redmond market, which then Redmond also faced that same growth and price increase. It further pushed into Madras, Sisters, well, Sisters was anyway, Madras, Prineville, and Lapine. We saw a lot of development in Lapine. And during the recession and coming back, you see a migration back into Bend when prices fell really low. But I kept an eye on Madras, Lapine, and Prineville. Prineville's a little bit different with Apple and Facebook now. It's separated from Madras, where in the past it would follow a similar course. So Madras and Lapine. The reason why I focus on them is because we saw the robust growth in 2005. And this time around, when Ben started taking off, and again, we saw near a 35% increase in Ben during the COVID years in overall median sales price. Lapine and Madras were they were slow coming into that growth, right? It wasn't like 2005, which was very encouraging. And Lapine's been holding its own, I would say. I think it's there's nothing there that would indicate to me that there's aside from economic catastrophe, it seems like it's holding its own on the numbers I'm reading, and the same with I would say Madras as well. Unlike 2005, it saw robust growth that arguably could be defined as overgrowth, and then the huge reduction afterwards during the recession. I don't see it this time. I think again, it's a completely different. It's a different market.
Two other things in the queue. First is someone made the comment. It's probably more of a comment to see if they're on the right page, I guess. My takeaway is that even though most appraisers strive to be objective, they're still susceptible to more subjective items such as color, for example, even if that susceptibility can be unconscious.
That's a very good point. Yeah, that's a very good point. It's we are human after all. And when I walked into a room in Sun River looking at a place and it was raspberry pink for the granddaughter, it's like I couldn't wait to get out of that room. I mean, but the point being is it's paint, right? The overall house itself, again, that was a piece of it, but there is a point where if you try to get into the details so much, keep in mind every conclusion we make has a margin of error, right? We're not saying this is market value. The market determines that. And so by a reasonable buyer and seller, knowledgeable, working together and negotiating, that's your market value. The appraiser is simply using methodology and techniques in order to derive at the most probable opinion of value. Okay. So, but it can be very difficult to move yourself away from certain things like that. But you have to to some degree.
So another question is, do appraisers consider and factor in broader influences? For example, national interest rates, war, conflict, new direct flights to, wealthier markets like San Diego.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You have to. And I would say the even getting down to an economic base within a region, it's important for an appraiser to understand what that is. And economic base, as an example, Bend was a manufacturing city at one point in time. Between Crown being down by the old mill district, Beaver Coaches, Cessna. I mean, there was industry within Bend that has changed. And for an appraiser to lose track of what that economic base is in an area, um, probably less is impactful on your standard single family, but even on a macro level, looking at interest rates, there's a direct correlation between market activity and those interest rates. So being keyed into those type of changes or monetary fiscal changes nationally is a big piece of it. Not that we're economic experts or have a PhD in economics, but definitely anything that pertains to impacting value.
And then there's lastly a follow-up question, it looks like, to the questions about Lapine and Bend, on the comments you made there. So are you suggesting that Madras values have not improved?
No, not at all. Not
Okay.
at all. Yeah, not at all. What I'm suggesting is that Madras, like Lapine, I would argue, even through the COVID years and the correction in that market, probably a little bit better of a situation than in some segments than we saw during the recessionary period when the growth was really too aggressive.
Awesome. Well, I don't see any other questions, so thank you very much to all the panelists. And Megan, I noticed you put a comment in the chat as well. She was letting everyone know that this weekend they're having a catwalk for cause on Saturday, hosted by Kendall Toyota of Bend. Everyone's invited. She threw a promo code for tickets to get 20% off your tickets for that, and that looks like a fundraiser then for Furnish Hope. So definitely want to encourage everyone to go to that. And again, thank you all. All I'm seeing is tons and tons of comments, like great information. Thank you so much. Really looking forward to the next one. So really appreciate all the insight and everything that you guys gave. We will have certificates go out no later than Tuesday next week. So you keep an eye out for those that are on here for continuing education. And we will also include a copy of Mike's slides and handout. And if there's anything, Megan or Donnie, you want me to include in that, just send it to me and I can send that out as well. So thank you again. Appreciate it. I know we went about 10 minutes over time, but it was great information. Thank you guys. So
thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Call me if you have any questions.
Yes. And if
Stop
you
by
want,
Furnish Hope.
I can include all your contact information when we send out the certificates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.
Nice to see you guys again.
Good to see you guys
Yeah.
too.
Good to see you guys.
Hopefully it's not 5 more years.
Yeah, right. All right.